My stepdad shoved me away from the Christmas dinner table and said, "That seat is for my real daughter. Get out." Everyone froze. My mom looked down at her plate. His daughter smirked like she had won. That was the moment something inside me broke, and I knew I would never let them humiliate me again. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Bryn, and I'm 26. After my real dad passed away, my mom married Cal. From the start, I never felt welcome in his house. I tried to stay quiet and helpful. I paid bills, cleaned, cooked, and followed every rule. I thought if I worked hard enough, I would be treated like family. Christmas meant a lot to me. I cooked most of the food that day. I helped decorate. I truly believed things were getting better. Sitting at that table felt like proof that I belonged. Then Cal pushed my chair back and embarrassed me in front of everyone. I left the house that night feeling small and hurt. But sadness slowly turned into clarity. I remembered something they never talked about. My late father had left me legal ownership in part of the house. My mom had never removed my name. I stayed calm. I spoke to a lawyer. I didn't argue or shout. When Cal later tried to make changes to the house, he found out the truth. He needed my permission. They begged me to let it go. I didn't. I sold my share and moved out. I now live peacefully in my own place. No one can ever tell me to leave the table again, because I choose where I sit. My name is Bryn, and I am 26 years old. I have always been the type of person who keeps her thoughts to herself. I focus on work, responsibilities, and doing what needs to be done. I don't ask for much, and I never liked causing trouble. Growing up, I learned early how to stay out of the way and handle things on my own. When I was 12, my life changed in a way I didn't understand at the time. My father passed away suddenly. One day he was there, and the next, he was gone. After that, our home felt quieter and heavier. My mom tried her best, but grief changed everything. I became more reserved, and she became more tired. 2 years later, she married Cal. He moved in with his rules, his habits, and his expectations. From the beginning, I could tell I wasn't part of the picture he imagined. I wasn't mistreated openly at first, but I was never fully included either. I felt like I was always in the background, watching instead of belonging. I learned to make myself small. I kept my opinions to myself. I stayed busy so no one could say I was lazy or ungrateful. Still, there was an unspoken feeling that I didn't truly fit. I wasn't his responsibility in his eyes, just someone who came with the package. Over time, that feeling grew stronger. I wasn't seen as a daughter or even family. I felt more like an obligation that couldn't be avoided. No matter how much effort I put in, there was always a distance I couldn't cross. Living there taught me patience, silence, and endurance, but it also taught me how painful it is to exist where you're never fully wanted. Cal treated Tess, his own child, like the center of his world. Everything about her mattered. Her opinions were heard first. Her mistakes were brushed away without consequences. If she wanted something, it appeared. If she failed, there was always a reason ready to protect her. The house seemed to orbit around her moods and needs. I watched this pattern quietly. While she received rewards, I was given responsibilities. If something needed cleaning, fixing, or organizing, it became mine. Expectations followed me everywhere. I was expected to wake early, finish tasks, and never complain. Any small error became a lesson. Any success passed without notice. Money flowed easily in her direction. New clothes, outings, and comforts were never questioned. When I needed something basic, I was told to wait or manage without it. The difference was never explained, but it was always clear. One child was cherished. The other was tolerated. Conversations at home rarely included me. Decisions happened around me, not with me. When I spoke, my words seemed to fall flat, as if they carried no weight. silence became safer. I learned that staying quiet meant fewer problems. Being unseen meant avoiding conflict. Despite everything, I remained respectful. I said thank you. I followed instructions. I kept my head down and focused on surviving each day. I didn't argue or demand fairness. I convinced myself that patience would eventually earn acceptance. Over time, invisibility became a habit. I moved through rooms without being noticed. I listened more than I spoke. I existed on the edges of family life, never fully inside it. Watching favoritism unfold hurt deeply, but I told myself endurance was strength. That dynamic shaped me more than I realized. It taught me how easily love can become conditional and how quickly a person can disappear inside their own home without anyone asking why. That winter gathering carried more meaning for me than any celebration before it. It wasn't about decorations or gifts. To me, it felt like a quiet test of whether my efforts finally counted. For months leading up to it, I had quietly supported the household in ways no one acknowledged. Every sacrifice felt like an investment in being accepted. I had been covering expenses whenever things fell short. I never announced it or asked for thanks. I told myself it was normal to help when you live under the same roof. I skipped personal comforts so lights stayed on and groceries stayed stocked. I believed contribution would earn respect. When the holiday approached, I put even more energy into preparation. I planned meals, spent hours in the kitchen, and made sure everything was ready on time. I didn't rush. I wanted every dish to be right. Cooking wasn't just work to me that day, it was proof that I cared and that I was trying to be part of something bigger. As the house filled with familiar sounds and smells, hope settled in my chest. I told myself that effort mattered more than blood. I thought actions spoke louder than names or labels. Sitting down to eat together felt like the final step toward belonging. I truly believed that sharing responsibility meant sharing space. That contributing meant being included. That giving without being asked would change how I was seen. In my mind, participation was the same as acceptance. Looking back, that belief was painfully naive. I confused usefulness with value. I assumed loyalty could replace affection. I thought that helping hold everything together meant I had a place there. That day mattered because I wanted confirmation that my presence had meaning. I wasn't chasing praise. I just wanted acknowledgement that I was part of the family circle. Instead, I would soon learn how fragile that hope really was, and how wrong I had been to think effort alone could earn belonging. I took a seat slowly, trying not to draw attention to myself. The room was full, voices overlapping, plates clinking. Before I could settle, a sudden force hit the chair beneath me. It scraped loudly across the floor. My body jolted forward, caught off guard, heart racing. Cal stood over me, his expression cold and firm. His voice cut through the room without hesitation. Each word landed sharply, meant to be heard by everyone present. There was no attempt to soften it. No hesitation. Just authority and dismissal wrapped together. The room went silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. I looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something. My mother stared at the table, her hands frozen. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Her silence hurt more than his words. Others avoided my eyes. Some pretended to be distracted. No one intervened. No one questioned what had just happened. In that moment, I understood how alone I truly was. The humiliation burned deep, spreading through my chest and throat. My face felt hot. My hands trembled as I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't cry out. I knew nothing I said would matter there. The message had already been delivered clearly and publicly. I walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. My legs felt unsteady, but I kept going. I focused on breathing, trying to keep control. Tears pressed hard, threatening to spill, but I refused to let them fall in that space. Once outside, the cold air hit my skin, sharp and real. My body shook, not from the weather, but from the shock of being reduced to nothing in front of people who were supposed to be family. I left without looking back. That moment stayed with me, replaying again and again. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was rejection made visible, spoken aloud, and witnessed by everyone, while I stood there completely unprotected. Later that evening, clarity settled in with a weight I couldn't ignore. Sitting alone, replaying every moment, a truth finally surfaced that I had been avoiding for years. What happened wasn't sudden. It was the result of something that had been there all along. I had simply refused to name it. I finally accepted that I was never viewed as belonging. There was a clear line, and I stood on the outside of it. Affection, loyalty, and protection were reserved for others. My presence only mattered when it served a purpose. Once that purpose ended, so did my value. Everything I had done came into focus. Every late night. Every sacrifice. Every time I chose peace over speaking up. None of it built connection. It only reinforced a role I was expected to play without complaint. I wasn't included out of love. I was tolerated out of convenience. That realization hurt more than the incident itself. It meant the effort, the patience, the hope, all of it had been misplaced. I saw clearly that silence had never protected me. It had only allowed the pattern to grow stronger. Staying quiet didn't keep harmony. It erased me. I asked myself what would happen if nothing changed. The answer was simple and terrifying. The same treatment would continue. The same disregard would repeat. And I would keep shrinking to fit into a space never meant for me. For the first time, I stopped blaming myself. I stopped wondering what I could have done better. The issue wasn't effort. It wasn't attitude. It was position. I had been placed somewhere beneath others, and no amount of compliance would move me. That night marked a turning point. I understood that endurance without dignity is not strength. It is surrender. And I knew, deep down, that if I didn't choose myself from that moment forward, no one else ever would. There was one detail buried beneath years of tension that remained unknown to them. It existed quietly, never discussed, never used, never brought into arguments. It was not something I planned or created. It came from the past, sealed in paperwork and memory. Before everything changed, arrangements had been made for my future. Decisions were finalized long before new people entered our lives. Those choices were protected by law, written clearly, and filed properly. Nothing about them was emotional. They were practical, careful, and deliberate. My mother had preserved those records without mentioning them to anyone else. She never used them as leverage or comfort. They stayed untouched, hidden in files, respected but ignored. Time passed, and no one questioned the foundation beneath the roof we lived under. To Cal, everything around him felt solid and unquestionable. He behaved as if authority and control were permanent. He never asked how things were structured. He never imagined there could be limits to what he believed belonged entirely to him. I discovered the truth gradually, not through confrontation but through quiet understanding. Pieces came together slowly. Documents. Names. Dates. Signatures. It wasn't dramatic. It was factual. And facts don't bend to ego. That knowledge didn't bring immediate satisfaction. It brought awareness. A sense of balance I hadn't felt before. For once, there was something that existed beyond opinion or favoritism. Something no one could dismiss with words or attitude. I carried that awareness carefully. I didn't share it. I didn't hint at it. I let them continue believing what they wanted. Their confidence remained unchallenged because I allowed it to. The truth stayed still, waiting. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a plan. It was simply reality resting beneath everything else. A reminder that power doesn't always look loud or aggressive. Sometimes it exists quietly, patient and steady. Until the moment arrives when it can no longer be ignored. That unseen detail would later shift everything. Not through force, but through legitimacy. Not through anger, but through structure. And most importantly, not through words, but through proof. I didn't react immediately. There was no yelling, no dramatic scenes, no impulsive decisions. Instead, I took quiet steps, measured and deliberate. I knew that any rash action would only give them more ammunition to dismiss me. Control required patience, not emotion. I began collecting everything that mattered: papers, agreements, records that proved my standing. Each piece was stored carefully, organized, and reviewed. I made sure nothing was missing, nothing that could be questioned later. Accuracy mattered more than speed. Legal guidance became my anchor. I consulted with someone who understood the weight of facts over feelings. Every conversation reinforced the reality: I had rights that were clear, undeniable, and enforceable. Knowing this brought a strange calm. I realized anger could cloud judgment, but preparation could sharpen it. I observed quietly, taking mental notes of patterns, behaviors, and routines. Their arrogance, their assumptions, even small habits, they all became information I could use later. I wasn't plotting destruction, I was positioning myself to protect what was mine. Every night, I reminded myself that patience was a weapon stronger than shouting. Time could expose weakness without me lifting a finger in anger. Calm thinking was my shield, planning my sword. I refused to be swayed by humiliation or frustration. By the time I was ready to act, everything was in order. My steps were deliberate. My evidence complete. My strategy simple yet effective. I didn't need chaos or drama to reclaim control. I discovered that quiet preparation carried more power than any immediate confrontation. Anger fades, but patience builds. And in the end, the most effective victories are those that happen without anyone realizing the game was being played until it's already won. About a month later, Cal started making big plans for the house. He wanted changes, upgrades, and a fresh start. He spoke confidently about loans, budgets, and permits, assuming everything was under his control. He didn't pause to consider anyone else's stake, least of all mine. I listened quietly as he detailed every idea, noting how sure he was that decisions were his alone. He believed he had the final word, that authority was absolute. He assumed he could move forward without any obstacles. Then came the moment reality stepped in. As he met with contractors and bank representatives, the necessary paperwork was reviewed. Something didn't align. Signatures were required. Documents were double-checked. And there it was, my name appeared on the deed, clear and undeniable. Suddenly, his confidence faltered. Questions were asked he couldn't answer. Permissions he had assumed were automatic now depended on me. The room's atmosphere shifted as the legal weight of my ownership became evident. I watched silently as his tone changed. Arrogance turned to disbelief. Every plan he had made was now subject to approval he hadn't expected to seek. His face tightened, a mixture of shock and frustration, while the contractors and officials merely followed procedure. I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I let the truth speak for itself. The authority he had taken for granted crumbled quietly but firmly. My position was undeniable, grounded in law rather than emotion. For the first time, the house no longer felt entirely out of reach. My voice, though calm, now carried weight. Decisions could no longer ignore me. And in that moment, the balance had shifted without a single argument, just the simple power of what was legally mine. The tension finally erupted in a quiet, suffocating room. Cal's voice cut through first, sharp and accusing. He labeled me as selfish, painting every action I had taken as personal attack rather than rightful choice. His tone left no room for discussion, only judgment. Tess jumped in, her words dripping with disdain. She called me bitter, convinced that my calm demeanor masked envy and resentment. She twisted the story in her favor, claiming my presence was motivated by malice rather than fairness. My mother's face was pale, eyes filled with sorrow. She pleaded, her voice trembling, "Can't you just let it go?" Her words carried years of hesitation, regret, and worry, but they also assumed that surrender was easier than truth. I stood firm, letting my gaze sweep across them. The memory of that Christmas day flashed vividly, her laughter, his shove, the scrape of the chair. I reminded them quietly but clearly what had happened, recounting the humiliation that had marked me as invisible in the family I had hoped to be part of. No shouting. No tears. Only the stark reminder of how they treated me when I had given my all. The room grew still, the weight of that single act lingering longer than any argument. Their accusations fell flat against reality. The injustice was undeniable, and for the first time I didn't shrink. I didn't flinch. I didn't allow guilt to settle over me. In that confrontation, the power shifted not because I raised my voice but because I refused to let them rewrite history. I stood in truth, and they were forced to see the consequences of their own choices. I didn't need to create chaos or yell for attention. Instead, I took steps that were quiet but irreversible. Every action was measured, precise, and fully within my rights. There was no drama, only resolution. I chose to remove myself from the situation entirely. Rather than fighting or demanding respect, I exercised the control I had quietly accumulated. Selling my portion of the house was deliberate. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was strategy, calculated, lawful, and complete. The process was straightforward. Papers were signed, agreements finalized, and my name officially removed from all responsibilities tied to the home. There was no loophole left, no lingering connection to give them leverage. It was clean, absolute, and definitive. As I packed my belongings, I felt a sense of liberation that anger could never have provided. Walking away wasn't surrender, it was reclamation. Every step I took into my new space was a step away from the years of neglect, favoritism, and disregard. For the first time, the decisions about a home, a family, or my life rested entirely with me. They had no legal ground, no emotional weapon strong enough to bind me. The control they had assumed was shattered simply by following the rules they had ignored. Freedom settled over me slowly, like sunlight creeping into a long-darkened room. I carried no bitterness in my actions, only clarity and authority. What had been a place of humiliation became a closed chapter, a part of my past I had firmly left behind. In taking this step, I realized real power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it is quiet, deliberate, and undeniable. And when used correctly, it transforms fear and frustration into independence and peace. After I left, their carefully maintained image began to crumble almost immediately. The routines and control they had relied on started showing cracks. What once seemed seamless and orderly revealed tension and mismanagement lurking underneath. Financial problems quickly became visible. Decisions that had once been hidden or ignored now created real consequences. Bills, repairs, and unexpected expenses piled up, and no one else was prepared to handle them. Their confidence faltered as reality pressed in. Arguments started to ripple through the household. Voices rose, frustrations boiled over, and finger-pointing became constant. Each person sought to shift responsibility, but no one had the authority or foresight to stabilize the situation. Chaos replaced the carefully curated harmony they had projected. I noticed a change in the way they spoke about me afterward. The calls stopped. Messages were ignored. Any attempt to involve me in their problems was met with silence. It became clear that my presence had once been a safety net, and without me, they were left exposed. The house that had once felt like a fortress for them now felt unstable. The illusion of control vanished, replaced by disorder and regret. Every habit and choice that had seemed minor now created ripple effects, and the family's facade faltered under pressure. Observing from a distance, I realized how much balance my presence had brought without their acknowledgement. My absence highlighted the reliance they had on me, not out of affection but convenience. In the end, the household no longer projected perfection. What remained was a fragile, strained structure struggling to support itself. And I, finally free, watched silently as the consequences of their choices unfolded without interference from me. Today, I have a space that is completely my own. It isn't large or fancy, but it carries a sense of calm I never experienced before. Every corner, every item, reflects decisions I made for myself, without compromise or interference. The quiet here is different, it isn't lonely. It's the kind of peace that comes from knowing I am in control. I arrange my days, my meals, and my routines exactly as I want. I wake up without fear of judgment or expectation, and I sleep knowing I belong in my own world. When I think about family gatherings now, it no longer carries anxiety or shame. I choose when to join, who to share space with, and how to be present. There is no imposed hierarchy, no unfair comparison. My voice, my presence, and my decisions matter because they are entirely mine. The memory of that Christmas night, the shove, the words, the humiliation, remains vivid. But instead of pain, it now serves as a reminder of strength. I didn't fight or argue, I acted with strategy and patience. I reclaimed what was always mine in a way that no anger could ever achieve. Walking away that night became my act of courage. It was the moment I learned that standing up doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means leaving behind what diminishes you and creating space where respect is automatic. Now, my table, my home, my life is mine alone. I set the rules. I decide who sits beside me. And every time I do, I am reminded that true power lies not in forcing others to see you, but in giving yourself the place you deserve. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away, or should I have given them another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.